90%. I mean, just pause for a second and let that number actually sink in. 90% of early stage startups fail within their first 36 months.
Yeah, it's a brutal statistic.
It really is. Like, if you were about to board an airplane and they announced a 90% chance of crashing, you wouldn't get on the plane.
Right, definitely not.
But entrepreneurs, they do it every single day. And I think the wildest part about that statistic is why they crash. Because it's usually not that the founders forgot how to code.
No, it's rarely a technical failure.
Exactly. They aren't failing because they couldn't engineer the circuit board or, even because they ran out of seed money in a lot of cases. They fail because they spent years flawlessly building a product that literally no one asked for. They just build in this massive echo chamber.
Which is just the ultimate tragedy of the startup ecosystem, honestly. It's a failure of alignment, not execution. You constantly see these brilliant engineers solving problems that, well, they just don't exist outside of their own heads.
Right. And that brings us exactly to the mission for today's deep dive. We are going to completely tear down that echo chamber and figure out how to move from founder assumptions to absolute ground truth.
Yeah, that transition is everything.
For sure. So whether you are currently writing code for some massive B2B SaaS platform or, I don't know, formulating a new beverage in your kitchen, this is for you. We are mastering the science of early customer feedback loops.
And we really have the perfect roadmap for this. All the insights we're unpacking today are pulled from this incredibly expansive masterclass document by StartupLanes.
Yeah, which is just a goldmine of data.
It really is. And for any listeners who might not be familiar with them, StartupLanes is this global accelerator. They operate in 56 cities across 15 different countries.
Wow.
Yeah, they've facilitated $111 million in institutional funding across 136 portfolio companies. So when they explain what allows a company to survive that startup death zone, it's not just some academic theory, it is battle-tested data.
Which is exactly what we need. And, the foundational philosophy for all this comes from Dr. Shishir Gupta, the founder and CEO of StartupLanes.
Yes, his framing on this is so crucial.
Right. He has this quote I just can't get out of my head. He says, "Feedback is not a single survey you deploy after product launch. It is the oxygen that keeps your value proposition alive."
The oxygen metaphor is so perfect. I mean, if you cut off oxygen to a brain, the brain dies. It really doesn't matter how intelligent that brain is.
Exactly.
And it's the same for a startup. If you cut off the feedback, the startup dies. It doesn't matter how elegant your code base is.
So, okay, let's unpack this. If feedback is oxygen, why are so many of these companies suffocating? If everyone knows we need to talk to customers, why is that 90% failure rate still happening?
Well, it's because the current, standard issue architecture for asking for feedback is fundamentally broken. It's systematically flawed.
How so?
So, in theory, a continuous customer feedback loop is supposed to have 5 very neat stages. First, you collect the feedback. Second, you analyze it. Third, you prioritize what to fix.
Okay, makes sense so far.
Right. Fourth, you implement those changes. And fifth, you close the loop by actually telling the user that you fixed it.
Which sounds incredibly logical, right? Collect, analyze, prioritize, implement, close the loop. What is the actual problem?
The problem is that human behavior and corporate reality just completely shatter that model. There's some recent benchmark data from Zonka Feedback and UserPilot. They're major players in the customer experience space.
Right.
Their data shows that over 93% of customer feedback captured by B2B teams is never analyzed.
Wait, 93%?
It literally just sits in a digital void. And of the 7% of product teams that actually do analyze their feedback, 87% of them are relying on manual spreadsheets to do it.
Hold on. We live in an era where, artificial intelligence is writing complex software architecture. We literally have cars driving themselves down the highway.
Yeah, I know where you're going with this.
You're telling me that 87% of product teams are sitting in a room, reading user complaints, and just manually color-coding cells in Microsoft Excel. Make that make sense.
I mean, I can't make it make sense, but it is exactly what is happening. And when you realize that, the 90% failure rate suddenly makes total sense.
Yeah, it really does.
Because it's a massive operational bottleneck. A product manager cannot manually synthesize 10,000 bug reports in an Excel sheet and somehow still have time to build a strategic roadmap.
Right, there just aren't enough hours in the day.
Exactly. But that bottleneck is actually the second stage of the failure. The first stage is how we collect that data to begin with. We have to talk about survey fatigue.
Oh man, survey fatigue is so real. I feel it every single day. I'll buy like a pair of socks online, and 3 days later, I get an email with a massive banner asking me, how did we do? Take our 10-minute survey.
What do you do?
I just hit delete instantly, every time.
You and everyone else. The source material references data from Refiner, and they evaluated over 50 million survey views. The response rate for those classic post-interaction email surveys, it's collapsed to under 5%.
Honestly, 5% feels generous to me. If I'm in the middle of a busy workday on a Thursday, and an email asks me to meticulously rate an interaction I had with some software on a Monday, I'm just not doing it.
Of course not. It interrupts your workflow.
Yeah, it breaks my concentration. And frankly, I suffer from recency bias. I don't even accurately remember what my specific point of frustration was 3 days ago.
And that gets right to Dr. Gupta's core mandate. He argues that if you treat feedback as an interruption, you just get biased, low-quality data.
Which makes sense. You're just getting data from the angriest people or the people with too much free time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the imperative for a modern startup is to capture what he calls friction-free, context-aware telemetry. And you have to capture it right at the point of action.
Right. You can't wait for that quarterly email survey to find out your users are angry.
No, you have to intercept them in the moment.
Okay, so how do we intercept them without being incredibly annoying? Because nobody wants a pop-up blocking their screen every 5 seconds either.
Right, that's just as bad. The masterclass breaks down this concept called the multi-channel feedback matrix. Basically, this strategy is to meet the user where they are using the right tool for the right moment.
Okay, so diversifying the collection methods.
Exactly. You have contextual in-app prompts. These are microsurveys, just 1 or 2 questions that appear natively inside the workflow, timed perfectly to an action you just finished.
Okay, that sounds way less intrusive.
Yeah. Then you have qualitative methods, like one-on-one video interviews, which we really need to dive deeply into. You also have passive telemetry, which doesn't ask the user anything at all.
It just watches what they do.
Right, it silently observes their behavioral data. And then finally, you have community and support channels like Reddit threads or intercom support tickets.
What really stands out to me here is the philosophical shift. The source brings up Fred Reichheld, the guy who created the Net Promoter System.
Yes, the NPS score.
Right. His whole ethos is that the ultimate goal is to treat your customers so well that they essentially become your marketing department.
Which is the dream for any startup.
For sure. But you definitely do not achieve that level of loyalty by spamming their inbox with 10-page surveys. You achieve it by weaving the feedback mechanism so seamlessly into the experience that it just feels natural.
Right. Think about the mechanical difference here. Say a user spends 10 minutes formatting a really complex financial report in your app, and then they hit export.
Okay.
If a microsurvey appears right next to the download button that simply says, did this report format the way you expected? Yes or no? That yields high fidelity, actionable data, and it doesn't break their concentration at all.
It's just a single click. Okay, so let's say a startup fixes their timing. They ditch the awful email surveys. They start asking in the app right at the moment of friction. But what happens if they are asking fundamentally flawed questions?
That is a huge problem.
Because as we move into the qualitative side of this matrix, it turns out that founders are exceptionally bad at talking to human beings.
Oh, it's one of the greatest ironies of entrepreneurship, honestly.
Yeah.
Qualitative interviews are supposed to give you deep, empathetic context. They're meant to uncover the why behind the user's behavior.
Right.
But the way most founders conduct these interviews actively guarantees they will be lied to. And it all stems from this massive psychological trap, which is the human desire for politeness.
This part is so fascinating. The document quotes Dr. Gupta explicitly warning about this. He says, politeness is the silent killer of early-stage startups.
It really is.
He notes that when a prospect tells you your idea is great, they are giving you a compliment, not a customer commitment.
Just think about the typical scenario. A founder manages to get a potential customer on a video call. The founder is super enthusiastic. They've poured their heart and soul into this idea.
Yeah, they're practically vibrating with excitement.
Exactly. And then they ask a leading question. They say something like, hey, if I built a one-click payroll automation tool that saved you 5 hours a week, would you pay $50 a month for it?
And the person on the other side of that camera is just a nice, normal person who doesn't want to crush this hopeful founder's dreams.
Right. Nobody wants to be the bad guy.
Plus, it costs them $0 to be agreeable in that moment. So they smile, they nod, and they say, oh, absolutely, that sounds like a brilliant idea. I definitely buy that.
And what happens next?
The founder hangs up the phone, celebrates, spends 6 months building the payroll tool, launches it, and that same prospect completely ignores all their emails.
Yep. Because the founder asked the prospect to predict the future. And humans are just fundamentally terrible at predicting their own future behavior.
It is so true. It's like asking me in December if I plan to go to the gym 5 days a week next year.
I'm guessing you'd say yes.
Of course I'm going to say yes. Future me is a highly disciplined athlete. But if you want the actual truth about my fitness habits, you shouldn't ask me about my future plans.
You should ask to see your bank statement.
Exactly. Check if I actually paid for a gym membership in the last 6 months.
That is the perfect analogy. We are highly aspirational when predicting our future, but the past is a pragmatic, undeniable record of our actual priorities.
That behavioral reality is exactly why the StartupLanes framework leans so heavily on a methodology created by Rob Fitzpatrick. It's known as the MOM test.
The MOM test is brilliant.
Uh-huh.
The basic premise is that you should formulate your interview questions so rigorously that even your own mother couldn't lie to you about the answers, even if she desperately wanted to protect your feelings.
So how exactly do we outsmart Mom here?
Fitzpatrick outlines 3 really uncompromising rules for these interviews. Rule number 1, you must talk about the customer's past life and their current workflows. You never, ever talk about your hypothetical idea.
Okay, past life, no ideas. Got it.
Rule number 2, ask for specifics regarding past events. Absolutely 0 opinions or predictions about the future are allowed.
Okay, so no future tripping. What's the third rule?
Rule 3, the founder needs to talk less, listen way more, and act like a detective who's just looking for actual dollars spent or time wasted.
Okay, let's actually role play this so listeners can hear the mechanics of it. Let's say I'm a founder and I want to build a new SaaS tool that organizes business expense receipts for freelancers.
Okay.
The flawed leading question would be, would you pay $20 a month for an app that scans and automatically organizes your receipts?
Right, which violates every rule. It pitches your idea, it asks for a future prediction, and it practically begs for a polite why.
So how do I fix it?
The MOM test approach requires a complete pivot. Instead, you say, walk me through how you managed your expense receipts last month. Show me the exact software or the shoebox or the spreadsheet you used. How much time did you actually spend doing it?
Oh, wow. And the beauty of that approach is what happens next. If the freelancer says, oh, I just threw them all in a drawer and handed them to my accountant at the end of the year, it took me 5 minutes, what does that tell the founder?
It tells the founder that the problem isn't acute enough to warrant a new software purchase. You're looking for existing workarounds.
Right. A salesperson goes into an interview looking for validation. They just want to hear a yes.
But a detective goes in looking for evidence of pain.
Exactly.
If that freelancer says, I hate this process so much that I build a custom Zapier integration that pipes photos from my phone into a Google Drive folder, and I pay a virtual assistant $50 a month to manually enter the totals, that is evidence.
That is the ground truth. Because if they aren't actively trying to solve the problem clumsily with existing tools, they are certainly not going to pay you to solve it elegantly with a new tool.
Exactly.
Okay, so qualitative interviews, when they're conducted correctly using the MOM test, give us the context. They tell us the why.
Right.
But as we know, humans are still fallible. We misremember things, or we don't realize how much time we're actually wasting. So to find out the objective, we have to strip away human language entirely, right? We have to look at the math.
Yeah, this is the transition from qualitative empathy to quantitative ruthlessness. Dr. Gupta establishes a very clear hierarchy here.
What's the rule?
Expressed opinions are subjective. Behavioral telemetry is objective truth. You can't just track the feedback form. You have to track the cursor, the clicks, the screen time, and the credit card swipes.
The cold, hard truth of telemetry.
Exactly.
The masterclass document actually outlines 4 core quantitative formulas that every early-stage startup has to track. And for our listeners, don't worry, we are not going to get bogged down in dense algebra here.
No, we'll keep it practical.
We're just going to look at the mechanisms behind these metrics because the logic here will completely change how you view product development. Let's start with the first one, the Sean Ellis disappointment metric.
Right, which is often used as the ultimate test for product market fit, or PMF.
Break that down for us. Who is Sean Ellis and what is this metric?
So Sean Ellis was the marketer who helped scale Dropbox and Eventbrite. He basically realized that standard satisfaction surveys were essentially useless.
Because everyone just says they're satisfied.
Exactly. So he popularized this very specific, really counterintuitive survey question. You ask your active user base, how would you feel if you could no longer use this product.
Okay, and what are the options?
The multiple choice options are typically very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, or not disappointed. And here is the kicker. The formula completely ignores anyone who isn't very disappointed.
Which feels so harsh. Like, if someone says they would be somewhat disappointed if my app disappeared, my instinct as a founder is to count that as a massive win. They like it.
I know, it feels counterintuitive.
But this metric says the target is to get 40% or more of your users to say they would be very disappointed. And if you hit that 40% threshold, you have achieved product market fit.
That's the magic number.
But I really want to dig into that number. Why are we only aiming for 40%? Why on earth wouldn't a founder want 100% of their users to be completely satisfied?
Well, it comes down to utility versus preference.
Ah,
To really understand this, we have to look at a famous philosophy from Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator.
oh, I love Paul Graham. What did he say?
He said, "It's better to make something a few people love than something a lot of people like."
That makes a lot of sense.
Think about it. If 100% of your users merely somewhat like your product, your business is incredibly fragile. They are just using you out of convenience.
Right. And the second a competitor offers a minor discount, or maybe a slightly prettier interface, they will instantly churn.
Exactly, because there's no switching cost to something you only somewhat care about.
Okay, but if 40% of your user base considers your product so absolutely vital to their daily workflow that they would be furious, like actively very disappointed if it vanished, you found a core utility.
You've dug your roots deep into their operation.
Right. You can survive competitor attacks, you can raise your prices, and most importantly, you can scale that core utility to find more people just like that 40%.
You basically ignore the lukewarm majority and build aggressively for the passionate minority.
That totally flips the traditional approach to customer satisfaction on its head.
Huh.
Okay, the second core metric is asymptotic cohort retention.
Yes.
Now, that sounds like a term you need a PhD in statistics to understand, but the physical mechanism of it is actually quite intuitive.
It's entirely visual, really. Just imagine a line graph. The horizontal x-axis represents time, days, weeks, or months since a group of new users signed up for your product.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And the vertical y-axis represents the percentage of those users who are still actively logging in.
Right, so on day 0, when they first sign up, the line starts at the very top left of the graph at 100%.
Yes.
And then, as time goes on, that line immediately starts dropping as people naturally lose interest and stop logging in.
You will always lose people. Churn is an inescapable reality of software. But what investors and smart founders look for is the specific shape of that drop.
What shape do they want?
Well, if that line keeps going down week after week, month after month, and eventually intersects with the bottom of the graph at 0%, you don't have a business. You have a leaky bucket.
Because no matter how much money you spend on marketing to pour new users into the top, they will all eventually drain out.
Exactly. But what if the line drops, maybe down to 30% or 20%, but then it stops dropping?
Yeah.
What if it flattens out and becomes a perfectly horizontal line, parallel to the x-axis?
That flat horizontal line is your asymptote.
Exactly. That is asymptotic cohort retention. It means that despite the initial drop-off, a specific, predictable percentage of users stick around indefinitely.
They form a permanent baseline.
Yes. That flat line is mathematical proof that your product has lasting value, and it proves that your continuous feedback loops are successfully preventing total churn. Without that flat line, scaling is literally just burning cash.
Look for the flat line, avoid the cliff. Got it. Okay, formula number 3 is TTV speed, which stands for time to value.
This one is all about velocity.
Right, it's a measurement of speed. How many seconds, minutes, or clicks does it take for a brand new user to experience the core magic moment of your product?
Give me an example.
Like, if you build an app that removes background noise from audio files, the time to value is the exact second they hear their audio magically cleaned up.
Right.
If it takes them 20 minutes of reading tutorials and configuring settings to get to that moment, they will just abandon the app. The faster the TTV, the higher the retention.
Absolutely. And finally, we have the fourth formula, which might be the most crucial mechanism for protecting engineering resources. It's called the feature engagement density ratio.
Yes, let's unpack this one deeply because I think a lot of founders fall victim to this trap. How do we actually calculate it?
It's a really simple division problem.
Yeah.
You take the daily active users, or DAU, of a specific individual feature you just built, Then you divide that number by the total daily active users of your entire platform.
Okay, simple enough math.
The framework establishes a really strict threshold here. If that ratio is less than 0.15, meaning less than 15% of your overall active user base is engaging with this specific feature, it is a massive red flag.
Okay, I have to push back on this a little bit, or at least play devil's advocate for the founders out there.
Sure, go for it.
Let's say I am a product manager. I spend 3 months researching, designing, and coding an incredibly powerful, complex analytics dashboard for my software. I push it live.
Okay.
I track the telemetry, and I see that only 10% of my total users are clicking on it. But that 10% absolutely loves it. They are my power users. Why is that considered a red flag? Should I be celebrating that I provided huge value to that 10%? Isn't that the definition of innovation?
I mean, it definitely feels like innovation to the founder,
It
but
did.
from an architectural standpoint, it is product bloat.
Product bloat.
Yes, and this is exactly why telemetry is so vital. It protects you from your own qualitative success. Think about what usually happens in your scenario. You launch the dashboard, 10% use it. A handful of those users send you glowing emails saying, "This dashboard changed my life, thank you."
Right, my loudest customers.
Exactly. If you only rely on that qualitative feedback, you pat yourself on the back. You think it's a huge win. But the telemetry tells a much darker objective truth.
Which is that 90% of the people paying for my software are actively ignoring the thing I just spent 3 months building.
Precisely. To that 90%, your new dashboard isn't a feature. It's visual clutter. It just makes the interface more confusing.
Well, that's a good point.
Furthermore, every new feature requires ongoing maintenance. When you update the core code, you have to ensure it doesn't break that dashboard. You are paying server costs for it. You are dragging down the speed of the entire app for a feature that the vast majority of your market doesn't even want.
Wow.
The feature engagement density ratio forces founders to ruthlessly prune features that don't serve the broader user base.
That is a phenomenal reality check. It's like building a Swiss Army knife, right? If you just keep adding tiny tools to it every time one specific person asks for a corkscrew or a magnifying glass, eventually the knife weighs 10 pounds and you can't even fit it in your pocket.
That's a great way to look at it.
You haven't made a better tool, you've just made a heavy paperweight.
Right.
Okay, so a startup has the qualitative context from the mom test interviews. They have the cold, hard, quantitative truth from the telemetry formulas.
Yeah.
The data is flowing, but this creates a totally new, massive problem.
Yeah, the synthesis bottleneck.
Exactly. When you have thousands of data points pouring in every single week, interview transcripts, microsource clicks, behavioral logs, bug reports, how on earth does a product team decide what to actually build on a Monday morning? Because you simply can't build it all.
Right. And this brings us to the operational bridge between data collection and engineering execution.
Yeah.
As we noted at the beginning, 90% of early-stage feedback remains totally unprocessed.
I just drown in it.
Exactly. Teams drown in the noise because they lack a systematic way to filter it. This is where artificial intelligence and mathematical prioritization models become indispensable.
The source material focuses heavily on synthesizing that noise into signal. Let's talk about the AI aspect first. Modern product teams aren't reading every single support ticket manually anymore, are they?
No, definitely not. They are utilizing AI sentiment engines. They essentially feed thousands of raw interview transcripts, App Store reviews, and sales call recordings into these engines.
And the AI just sorts it.
The AI acts as an automated librarian. It tags and clusters the raw human frustration into specific themes. So instead of a product manager facing a wall of 500 angry emails, the AI dashboard simply gives them a summary.
Like what?
It'll say you have a cluster of 300 negative interactions specifically related to onboarding friction, and a secondary cluster of 200 issues related to billing clarity.
Wow, okay. So the AI creates the map. But once you have those clusters, the engineering team still needs a definitive way to rank them. Because even if you know what the main themes are, you still have limited developer hours.
That's where Dr. Gupta establishes a very strict triage rule.
What's the rule?
You must never, ever build a feature just because an enterprise client shouted the loudest during a sales call or because the CEO had a brilliant idea in the shower.
I feel like a lot of startups are guilty of that CEO shower idea.
Oh, absolutely. But every single request, no matter who it comes from, must be routed through a mathematical prioritization model. And the gold standard for this is the IC formula.
Let's break down the mechanics of the RICE formula because I want the listeners to be able to use this literally tomorrow. It's an acronym, right? RICE, reach, impact, confidence, and effort.
Exactly. It's an algebraic equation designed to strip emotion away from the product roadmap.
Let's role-play it to see how it functions as a defense mechanism for engineering resources. Let's say a really vocal customer is demanding that you build a highly customized dark mode interface for your app.
Okay, perfect example. So you're the product manager. Run dark mode through the RICE formula. First is reach.
Okay, reach. How many users will this actually affect in a given quarter? Let's say we have 10,000 active users, and industry data shows about 20% of people prefer dark mode. So the reach score is 2,000.
Right. Next is impact. On a standardized scale, how much does this actually solve a critical problem or drive revenue?
Well, a new payment gateway would have massive impact. Dark mode. It's nice, but it doesn't fundamentally change the utility, so the impact score is pretty low.
Okay, next is confidence. How sure are we that our estimates for reach and impact are actually accurate? Do we have hard telemetry or are we just guessing?
Well, we have solid industry data on dark mode preferences, so confidence is high, let's say 80%.
Okay, so you multiply reach times impact times confidence, you get a number, and then you divide all of that by the final variable, effort.
Right, the anchor. How many person-months of engineering, design, and testing time will this take?
To build a true dark mode, you have to recolor every single asset in the application, test it for contrast accessibility, and essentially maintain 2 separate UI libraries forever. It is a massive amount of effort.
So when I divide that initial score by the massive effort score, the final RICE number is going to be incredibly low. The math basically proves that dark mode is a terrible use of our time right now, regardless of how loudly that one customer was demanding it.
Exactly. The RICE formula forces you to evaluate if the juice is worth the squeeze. It protects the startup's most expensive and scarce asset, which is developer time.
The source also highlights a visual way to plot these scores called the impact versus feasibility matrix. You take the tasks and you map them into 4 quadrants.
Right, it's a great visualization.
If something has high impact and high feasibility, meaning it's highly valuable and easy to build, those are your quick wins, you do those immediately.
Yeah.
If it has high impact but low feasibility, meaning it's valuable but incredibly hard to build, those are your strategic moats. They require long-term planning, but they defend your business from competitors.
And then you have the bottom half of the matrix. Low impact, high feasibility. Those are low priority. Maybe a junior developer tackles them on a Friday afternoon if they have free time.
Makes sense.
And finally, low impact and low feasibility.
Yeah.
Those are thankless tasks.
Yeah.
You just delete the JIRA ticket entirely.
Just trash it.
Yeah, it creates absolute emotional detachment from the roadmap and prevents the founder's pet project from derailing the quarter.
Okay, so up to this point, we've discussed an arsenal of really brilliant standalone frameworks. The MOM test for qualitative empathy, cohort retention for quantitative truth, AI for synthesis, the RICE formula for prioritization.
All great tools.
But here is the fatal flaw in most scaling companies. These frameworks often live in total isolation.
Oh, absolutely, the silo effect.
Right. The data science team is staring at retention curves. The customer success team is doing the MOM test interviews. The product managers are running RICE scores, and none of these departments are actively talking to each other.
And that siloed architecture is precisely what causes companies to lose their alignment with the market. It's exactly what StartupLanes set out to eradicate.
How did they do it?
Under Dr. Gupta's leadership, they observed thousands of startups struggling with these silos, and they engineered a solution. They took all of these isolated academic methodologies and fused them together into one unified sequential master blueprint.
The SL continuous framework.
Exactly.
And as we dive into this framework, let's ground ourselves in the stakes one more time. The source points out that 42% of all startup failures are explicitly attributed to a lack of market demand.
42%. That's huge.
Not bad marketing, not bad leadership, but building something literally nobody wants. The continuous framework is designed as a fail-safe mechanism to guarantee that a company remains aggressively aligned with what the market actually demands.
It is a 10-step operational sequence.
And yes, continuous is an acronym. Let's walk through the mechanics of how it actually flows.
Sure. So the sequence begins with collection and moves all the way through to systemic governance. First is C for contextual capture. This is deploying those hyper-targeted in-workflow organic surveys we discussed earlier, completely avoiding email fatigue.
All right.
O is objective telemetry. You never blindly trust the survey. You immediately cross-reference the user's claim with their actual behavioral data log.
Crisp but verify with math.
Exactly.
Yeah.
N is non-leading interviews. For the really complex problems, you get them on a call and apply the rigid rules of the MOM test.
Okay.
T is triaged synthesis. You pour all this raw data into an AI clustering engine to find the main themes and then back effort scoring. You run those themes through the IC matrix to decide what actually gets built.
Okay, so that spells EONTI. That is the front half of the loop identifying what to do. The back half is how you execute it.
Right.
So the second N is non-stop iteration. This means abandoning massive, risky quarterly product launches in favor of shipping tiny, weekly micro sprints.
Yes.
U is user-centric retesting. Before you push that weekly update to everyone, you put it in front of a small beta cohort to verify it didn't break anything.
Crucial step.
O is outbound loop closing, which we definitely need to talk about in a minute because it's massive.
Oh, it changes everything.
The second U is unit economic alignment. This is a vital sanity check. Did this new feature actually improve the customer lifetime value or lower the customer acquisition cost? If not, it wasn't a successful iteration.
Right, it has to make financial sense.
And finally, S is scaled governance. This means taking all these feedback metrics and integrating them into the formal board-level report alongside the financial data. So CONTINUOUS.
It is a totally comprehensive operational loop. Now, out of those 10 steps, StartupLanes emphasizes that 3 of them serve as the core load-bearing pillars that the rest of the system rests on.
Which 3?
Contextual capture, objective telemetry, and outbound loop closing. We've explored the collection and the telemetry, but we really must focus intensely on that third pillar.
Outbound loop closing.
Yes, because it completely changes the dynamic between a company and its users.
Right. If you're listening to this and you're about to launch a beta, ask yourself this. Are you setting up a black hole where feedback goes to die, or are you building an advocacy machine?
That's the real question.
Because technically, outbound loop closing sounds like a boring customer support function, but it is actually the greatest secret marketing hack in the entire startup playbook.
It is a psychological masterstroke.
Yeah.
Just think about the internal state of a user who submits a bug report.
Okay.
They experience friction. They got annoyed. They literally stopped their workflow, found the support button, typed out their problem, and hit send. And then some sent it.
Usually. Absolute silence. Maybe an automated, we received your ticket email if you're lucky.
Right. And weeks go by, and the vast majority of the time, that user just assumes their feedback went into a corporate black hole. It breeds this deep resentment toward the brand.
Outbound loop closing flips that script entirely. It mandates a zero unresolved ticket policy. Let's say a user submits a complex request. It gets triaged, it gets rice scored, and maybe it takes the engineering team 3 months to actually build the solution.
Right.
When that solution finally ships on a Tuesday night, the framework dictates that an automated, highly personalized system immediately emails that specific user.
And what does it say?
The email says something like, "Hey, Sarah, 3 months ago, you told us our export tool was broken. You are absolutely right. We listened to you. Our engineering team spent the last month rebuilding it, and it goes live today. Thank you for making our product better."
The psychological impact of that email is just profound. When a company actually circles back months later to prove that they listened, it shatters the user's expectation of corporate apathy.
It really does.
It transforms a mildly annoyed, casual user into a fiercely loyal, highly vocal brand advocate.
I know for a fact that if a software company did that for me, I would lose my mind. I would immediately take a screenshot of that email, I would post it on LinkedIn, I would tweet about it, and I would demand that all my coworkers switch to that software.
And that organic reaction is exactly why it's a marketing hack. When you weaponize customer support to create brand advocates, your customer acquisition cost, your CAC, just plummet.
Because your users are selling for you?
Exactly. Your existing users begin doing the heavy lifting of marketing and selling your product. It is a retention mechanism and an acquisition mechanism, perfectly disguised as basic customer support.
It is so elegant. Okay, so we have the architectural theory, we have the continuous framework. But to prove that this isn't just an academic white paper exercise, StartupLanes back this up with over 50 global case studies.
Yes, real-world examples.
Let's examine how this exact blueprint essentially built the modern technology landscape. We are going to start with the North American pioneers.
The North American examples perfectly illustrate how different companies index on different pillars of the framework. Let's start with Superhuman, the premium email client.
Oh, their origin story is fascinating.
Their entire origin story is a masterclass in utilizing the Sean Ellis PMF survey.
Yes, Superhuman is legendary for this. Before they even launched to the public, founder Rahul Vora needed to know if they were actually on the right track. So he deployed the survey to their closed beta users. How would you feel if you could no longer use Superhuman?
And he got a decent response. But he did something totally ruthless.
What did he do?
He completely ignored everyone who said they would be somewhat disappointed. He isolated only the cohort who said they would be very disappointed.
Wow.
He analyzed who those people were, and they were mostly executives and founders who processed hundreds of emails a day.
And then he took it a step further. He applied the RICE formula to prioritize only the specific features that this very disappointed core group requested.
Right. For example, they demanded incredibly fast, frictionless keyboard shortcuts, so their hands never had to leave the keyboard. They really didn't care about calendar integrations as much as they cared about raw speed.
So by focusing exclusively on the needs of the users who already loved the core utility, Superhuman pushed their PMF score to over 58%, which is well above that 40% benchmark.
And the result of that disciplined focus, they built a waitlist of over 100,000 users and successfully convinced people to pay $30 a month for an email client.
In a world where Gmail is totally free.
Exactly. They found their core believers, built a moat around them, and just ignored everyone else.
That is wild. Next up is Slack. Slack is the poster child for outbound loop closing.
In the early days, Slack's beta test consisted of just 6 to 10 other companies. But they treated every single piece of qualitative feedback with intense reference. They routed every single chat complaint, every minor bug report, directly into their product backlog.
They iterated nonstop, sometimes pushing multiple software updates in a single day.
And crucially, whenever a specific bug was patched, a Slack support rep would directly message the user who reported it to tell them it was fixed.
They closed the loop relentlessly.
They did. That hyper-responsiveness built immense trust, and they hit a $1 billion valuation in roughly 2 years.
Incredible. From software, let's jump to hardware. Tesla is a phenomenal example of objective telemetry in the physical world.
Tesla fundamentally rewired the feedback loop of the automotive industry. Traditional car companies rely on qualitative data that's filtered through this massive delay.
Like years of delay.
Yeah. A customer notices a rattling suspension. They wait 3 months for an oil change. They tell a mechanic at a dealership. The mechanic notes in a localized system. And maybe 2 years later, Detroit actually hears about it. Tesla bypassed all of that.
They maintain a net promoter score of 96, and the mechanism for that is brilliant. If a Tesla owner complains on a forum about the braking sensitivity, Tesla doesn't just send them a survey.
No, they pull the actual real-world telemetry logs directly from the vehicle's onboard computers. They verify the subjective complaint with objective data.
And this is the nonstop iteration pillar, they beam an over-the-air software patch directly to the car while it's parked in the user's garage.
They resolve 80% of vehicle adjustments via software without the user ever visiting a service center.
So Superhuman and Slack represent the qualitative, empathy-driven side of the framework. Tesla represents the ruthless, objective telemetry side.
And Airbnb is pure, boots on the ground, qualitative hustle. Back in 2009, Airbnb was flatlining. They were stalled at roughly $200 a week in revenue in New York City.
They couldn't figure out why growth had stopped.
Right, and the standard Silicon Valley response would be to buy more Google ads or A/B test the website button colors. But founders Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia physically flew to New York.
They applied the non-leading interviews pillar. They sat in the living rooms of their hosts and applied the mom test. They didn't ask, why aren't you getting bookings?
What did they ask?
They said, walk me through how you set up your listing last week. And what they realized through contextual observation was that the hosts were taking terrible, grainy photos of their apartments using early camera phones. The product was fundamentally unappealing to buyers.
So they didn't write an algorithm to fix it. They rented a nice camera, went door to door, and manually took professional, well-lit photos of the listings. They captured the context, they implemented the fix manually, and revenue doubled instantly to $400 a week.
That qualitative insight literally saved the company. Another incredible mechanism is how Stripe utilized contextual capture.
Stripe recognized that developers are their primary users, and developers hate breaking their flow state to go submit a bug report on a separate website.
It's just too much friction.
Exactly. So Stripe essentially embedded the suggestion box directly into the hammer the developer was holding. They built inline error reporting directly inside their code SDKs. If a developer hit a snag while integrating Stripe's payment gateway, Stripe systems knew instantly, right there in the code editor.
That is the ultimate frictionless telemetry. They use that highly specific error data to continuously refine their documentation and APIs. It reduced the time it takes a developer to set up payments from several months down to under 10 minutes.
Amazing.
And then you look at Duolingo, they are masters of microtelemetry.
Duolingo relies on tracking tap-by-tap abandon rates. They don't just look at whether a user finished a language lesson. They look at exactly which screen, which specific translation exercise caused the user to close the app.
Wow, they map the exact seconds of friction.
Yeah, by identifying those hyper-specific drop-off points, they use RICE to prioritize micro-updates, like implementing the famous streak freeze feature when they realized users were churning out of guilt after missing one single day.
That simple telemetry-driven iteration resulted in a 60% year-over-year increase in daily active users.
The document is just packed with these mechanical breakdowns. It details how Notion halted all new feature development for 6 straight months, purely to triage crash logs that their AI had tagged.
6 months of no new features, just fixing bugs.
Yes. It also explains how Figma built a complex staging environment specifically to invite influencer designers to test cursor latency at 60 frames per second before they launched multiplayer mode.
In Zoom, they engineered their video architecture to survive up to 40% packet loss, specifically based on connection telemetry from users on bad Wi-Fi.
HubSpot created a proprietary customer health index metric that accurately predicted and cut their churn by 50%.
And it even tells the story of Segment, who abandoned their entire original educational product after conducting non-leading interviews with developers. They pivoted entirely to open source analytics infrastructure and eventually sold to Twilio for $3.2 billion.
When you look across all of these North American giants, the common denominator isn't just that they are smart engineers, it is a culture of hyper-responsiveness.
Exactly. None of them sat back and waited for a quarterly email survey to inform them that their product was failing. They wired the feedback loop into the core architecture of the business model.
But this hyper-responsiveness isn't just a luxury for well-funded companies in Silicon Valley. The mechanics of the continuous framework apply globally, though the specific challenges change.
Right, let's cross the Atlantic and the Pacific. So we've seen how giants use this to iterate software in the US. But does this hyper-responsiveness work when you're dealing with fractured banking regulations across Europe or massive offline populations in Southeast Asia?
The playbook actually has to adapt. The European landscape is a perfect example of this. The feedback loops there are heavily indexed on navigating immense regulatory complexity and cross-border fragmentation.
Let's look at Spotify in Sweden. They had a massive product challenge. They had millions of songs. But telemetry showed users were suffering from choice paralysis. They just weren't discovering new music.
So Spotify built the Discover Weekly algorithmic playlist. But they didn't just blast it to their entire user base. They leaned heavily on the user-centric retesting pillar.
They deployed the new feature to a 1% beta cohort.
Right. They meticulously verified the telemetry to ensure that engaging with a recommendation engine actually increased the total time spent streaming, rather than just cannibalizing existing listening habits.
Once the math proved the concept, they scaled it, and Discover Weekly generated 5 billion streams in its first year alone.
Then look at the European fintech sector, which is notoriously difficult to navigate. Companies like Revolut and Wise out of the UK were trying to disrupt traditional banking.
They utilized highly specific in-app friction microsurveys. But the timing was everything.
They programmed these surveys to trigger exactly when a foreign exchange transaction failed, or at the exact moment a user encountered an opaque legacy bank fee and paused their screen.
They captured the user right at the moment of highest financial frustration. They used that direct contextual feedback to systematically strip away hidden fees and redesign the remittance flow, which allowed them to scale to over 30 million users organically.
N26, the digital bank in Germany, mapped out exactly where users were dropping off during the video KYC, Know Your Customer Identity verification process.
KYC is always such a pain point.
Oh, absolutely. But by tracking those specific drop-offs, they streamlined the regulatory onboarding to under 8 minutes.
UiPath, the robotics automation giant from Romania, fed thousands of enterprise support tickets into AI sentiment engines to figure out exactly why automated workflows were breaking in legacy IT environments.
Klarna, the Swedish buy now, pay later company, is a brilliant example of using the Rice E-matrix to balance regulatory risk.
How so?
They wanted to build a one-click guest checkout. They ran the math. The impact on conversion was massive, but the confidence in preventing fraud was the hurdle. They iterated on the risk models until the Rice score justified the build, resulting in a 30% lift in cart conversions.
Even Apple, with all their secrecy, uses this. When they radically redesigned the Safari address bar in the iOS 15 beta, it caused massive
I
confusion.
remember that.
Right. But because they had their beta feedback assistant app capturing contextual telemetry and qualitative complaints from European and global developers, they caught the backlash, triaged it, and reverted the design before the final public launch.
Okay, moving to the Asia-Pacific region, the mechanics shift again. The APAC market is largely defined by the rise of super app ecosystems and the immense challenge of bringing historically offline populations into the digital economy.
And when you are bringing offline populations online, the friction points are entirely different. Take Canva in Australia as a prime example of contextual observation.
What do they do?
They realized through telemetry that their platform was incredibly intimidating to non-designers, so they built a highly specific trigger. If a user stared at a design canvas for 3 consecutive minutes without moving their mouse to click export or save, the system recognized they were paralyzed.
Think about how empathetic that is. How many software tools just let you stare at a screen in frustration until you angrily close the tab?
Canva actively monitored for that 3-minute idle time, triggered a microsurvey to capture the exact nature of the confusion, and realized they needed to build one-click, pre-formatted templates.
That single insight, driven by idle time telemetry, is a core reason they now have over 130 million users.
In Southeast Asia, companies like Grab and GoTo, formerly Gojek, rely on what we can call hyper-local telemetry. When you are operating a ride-hailing app in Jakarta during the monsoon season, traditional GPS coordinates become completely useless because the roads flood.
Grab captured telemetry on widespread ride cancellations during storms. They realized drivers simply couldn't find passengers. So they rapidly iterated and built a picture-in-chat feature, allowing passengers to take a photo of exactly which flooded awning they were standing under.
Gojek, on the other hand, utilized the non-leading interviews pillar in the field. They literally went out and talked to their motorcycle drivers. They realized the drivers had significant idle time between passenger rides, and they were losing potential income.
So Gojek used that insight to launch multi-vertical dispatching. They layered food delivery and parcel delivery onto the same app network, allowing drivers to seamlessly switch tasks and boost their daily earnings.
In India, Razorpay tracked the exact drop-off rates on bank pages where users had to enter an OTP, a one-time password. The telemetry showed massive friction there, so Razorpay built an SDK that automatically read the OTP from the user's SMS, bumping conversion rates by 10% instantly.
Freshworks in India used AI to tag the sentiment of thousands of customer support calls to identify the specific bloated features in legacy systems like Salesforce, allowing them to build a cheaper, more streamlined alternative.
Postman used qualitative feedback from developer communities on Stack Overflow to continuously iterate their API testing tool, eventually turning it into a $5.6 billion platform.
And then there's Geo in India, which is just a staggering scale of telemetry. They wanted to bring high-speed digital services to hundreds of millions of rural citizens. They didn't just look at a map and guess where to build cell towers.
No, they deployed network health telemetry to track tower-level data dropouts in real time. They routed that massive data stream through Rice scoring to prioritize exactly which physical infrastructure to upgrade first. They successfully onboarded over 400 million rural users onto the digital grid.
This raises a critical point about emerging markets. Why are these tight, continuous feedback loops even more essential for survival in regions like APAC, Latin America, or the Middle East?
Why is it so much more critical there?
It comes down to consumer psychology. Historically, consumer trust in digital ecosystems, like trusting a digital wallet or an e-commerce delivery network, is significantly lower in these regions compared to North America.
That makes total sense. If you don't trust that your money is safe in an app, the second you encounter friction, you are gone forever.
Exactly. You build trust in a low-trust environment by visually proving to the customer that you are actively monitoring, acknowledging, and immediately fixing their specific points of friction. Hyper-responsiveness is the currency of trust.
Which perfectly transitions us into examining Latin America, the Middle East, and Africa. Because in these markets, we see the framework used to dismantle massive logistical and bureaucratic hurdles.
In Latin America, the focus is entirely on removing physical and financial friction. Rappi, the Colombian delivery super app, knew that missing items in grocery orders just destroyed trust.
So they embedded microsurveys directly onto the digital receipt immediately upon delivery, catching and refunding missing items in seconds before the user could even get angry.
Nubank in Brazil took on the notoriously painful bureaucracy of traditional Latin American banks. They fed thousands of angry support tickets into an AI sentiment engine, mapped out exactly what frustrated people about branch banking, the lines, the fees, the paperwork, and designed a purely digital banking experience that bypassed all of it. They scaled to 80 million users.
Mercado Libre in Argentina used telemetry to notice that digital credit card transactions were frequently declining due to legacy banking infrastructure, so they rapidly rolled out offline QR code payment systems to keep commerce flowing.
Kavak in Mexico recognized that nobody trusted the used car market, so they built an exhaustive 240-point vehicle inspection process, utilizing microsurveys at every single milestone to guarantee quality and build consumer confidence.
And in the Middle East and Africa, the framework is utilized to stitch together highly fragmented economic zones. Companies like Flutterwave and Paystack used transactional telemetry surveying exactly why cross-border payments were failing and combined it with in-depth developer interviews to build APIs that successfully scale across the continent.
Fari, the digital payment platform in Egypt, knew they couldn't rely on in-app surveys because their target demographic was largely unbanked.
Yeah.
So they literally went out and conducted field interviews at mom-and-pop retail kiosks to understand how people preferred to pay bills with cash.
Tabby, the buy now, pay later platform in the UAE, used interview data to realize that consumers in the region vastly preferred cash on delivery. So they prioritized engineering split payment systems that accommodated that cultural preference.
But perhaps the most profound application of the continuous framework isn't in software or financial services at all. It is in the physical world.
This is absolutely my favorite part of the StartupLanes document. We spent an hour talking about APIs, SaaS platforms, and super apps. The natural question is, does this framework apply to physical hardware? Does it apply to consumer packaged goods? And the answer is emphatically yes. Look at James Dyson.
Dyson is the physical embodiment of the nonstop iteration pillar. He wanted to solve a specific point of friction. Vacuum cleaners losing suction as the bag filled with dust.
He didn't just brainstorm a solution in CAD software.
No, he built a physical testing rig in a workshop, and he methodically designed, built, and captured performance data across 5,127 physical prototypes.
5,127 iterations over the course of 15 years. That is insane dedication. It is the exact same mechanical loop as a software company pushing daily code updates to a staging environment. But Dyson was doing it with metal, plastic, and cardboard in a physical workshop. He gathered the objective telemetry of airflow dynamics thousands of times until he achieved product-market fit.
And it applies to everyday consumer goods, too. The masterclass highlights a fantastic case study of a CPG beverage startup. When you are launching a new drink, traditional logic says you finalize a recipe, manufacture 1 million cans, put them in retail stores, and hope people buy them. If they don't, you go bankrupt.
But this startup applied the feedback loop to fluids. Instead of mass production, they produced what they called minimum viable batches, small runs of the beverage. They took these batches to local farmers markets. And here is the brilliant mechanical part. They printed QR codes directly onto the physical cans.
That QR code acts as physical telemetry. It bridges the physical product to a digital feedback loop.
Exactly. A customer buys the drink, takes a sip on the sidewalk, scans the code with their phone, and instantly takes a microsurvey, rating the sweetness, the carbonation, the flavor profile, right there in the moment of consumption.
The company gathered this localized data, went back to the kitchen, and adjusted the formulation multiple times. By iterating based on that hyper-local physical telemetry, before they ever signed a mass distribution contract, they ultimately reduced their retail return and failure rates by 18%.
It is absolute proof that the laws of gravity for business do not change. It does not matter if you are compiling thousands of lines of source code in San Francisco, if you are routing motorcycle food delivery in the monsoons of Jakarta, or if you are mixing a functional beverage in a commercial kitchen. The speed and fidelity of your feedback loop dictate your survival.
But, and this is a massive blinking red warning light for every founder listening, if you get excited by all of this and you run out tomorrow and implement every survey, every telemetry tracker, and every interview tactic without strategic restraint, you will plunge your company into a very dangerous place.
You will fall into what the industry calls the feature factory trap.
This is a critical pivot in our understanding of the masterclass. The collection of data is not the same as the abdication of leadership. Dr. Gupta issues a stark warning here to define the boundaries of the relationship, he says. The customer's role is to describe the problem in excruciating detail. The founder's role is to design the elegant solution.
You cannot outsource your product strategy to your users. If you do, you become a feature factory. You lose your overarching vision, and you just blindly ship whatever the latest survey requested. The user interface gets cluttered with 50 different buttons, the code base becomes an unmaintainable nightmare of spaghetti code, and the product completely loses its soul. The document explicitly outlines 4 dangerous feedback traps that founders must avoid.
Trap number 1 is the loudest customer bias. We touched on this during the RICE formula discussion. This trap springs when a founder bypasses all mathematical prioritization because one massive, high-paying enterprise client threatens to cancel their contract unless a highly niche custom integration is built immediately.
So the startup panics, diverts their entire engineering team for 3 months to build this one specific API integration. The enterprise client is happy, but absolutely nobody else in the entire user base ever touches it. You sacrifice 3 months of broad innovation to appease one loud voice.
Trap number 2 is the local optima trap. I love this concept. It's like perfectly arranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, or more accurately, it's like spending a year engineering the most beautiful aerodynamic spoiler for a car that doesn't have an engine.
The visual of climbing a hill is often used for this, right?
Yeah, imagine you are blindfolded, trying to find the highest peak in a mountain range. You feel the ground sloping up, so you keep walking up. You reach the top of a small hill, and every direction from there is down. So you stop, thinking you've optimized your position. You have found the local optima.
But if you took off the blindfold, you would see a massive, towering mountain just a mile away.
In product terms, this is when a team spends 6 months A/B testing the exact shade of blue for the sign-up button, endlessly optimizing a minor detail, while remaining completely blind to the fact that their core value proposition is fundamentally flawed. You are optimizing the wrong thing.
Trap number 3 is confirmation bias, which is arguably the most insidious because it happens subconsciously. This is when a founder has a very rigid vision for the product. They collect the data, but they selectively filter it. They eagerly read the 5 positive interview transcripts that agree with their idea, and they mentally dismiss the massive telemetry data showing a 90% churn rate as just users not understanding the product yet.
They twist the data to fit the narrative, rather than letting the data dictate the narrative.
And finally, trap number 4, the faster horses illusion. This is rooted in the classic, though perhaps apocryphal, quote from Henry Ford. He supposedly said, "If I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses." The underlying truth of that statement is profound. Customers are bound by their current reality. They can only describe solutions within their existing mental models.
Right. If you are a farmer in the 1800s, you know that transportation is slow, but you don't know what an internal combustion engine is. So if an inventor asks you what you want, you just ask for a genetically superior horse.
If Henry Ford operated as a feature factory, he would have started a horse breeding program. To build a car, you have to extract the core problem, I need to go faster, and then transcend the customer's proposed solution.
Balancing that visionary transcendence with the grounded reality of outbound loop closing is what creates what StartupLanes calls the advocacy flywheel. Because remember, we discussed earlier that 80% of users think their feedback goes into a black hole.
So, to avoid the feature factory, you don't build everything they ask for. But to build the advocacy flywheel, you do communicate everything. You explain the why. You use personalized release notes. You build in-app public roadmaps.
The public roadmap is a fantastic mechanism. It visually shows the user base what features are under consideration, what is in development, and what has been shipped. It creates transparency. If you reject a feature, you can publicly state, "We aren't building this because it conflicts with our core speed metrics." Users respect transparency much more than silence.
And when you do finally ship a highly requested fix, you execute the loop closing, but you add a vital final step. You don't just email the user to tell them it's fixed. You leverage their immediate rush of satisfaction by prompting them, right in that moment, to go leave a review on a public site like G2 or Capterra. You convert the resolution of friction into public marketing momentum.
It is a brilliantly engineered flywheel. But as a company successfully navigates these traps, as they find product market fit, and as they begin to scale rapidly, a new existential threat emerges. The physical mechanics of how the company handles this feedback have to mature. You cannot rely on a couple of founders doing all of this manually forever.
Which brings us to our final operational chapter, scaling the engine, transitioning from pre-seed hustle to Series A governance. In the pre-seed stage, the feedback loop is incredibly tight because it's just the founder. The founder is the one doing the mom test calls, they are writing the code, they're sending the direct loop closing emails, and they are pushing the daily micro releases. The feedback goes straight from the customer's mouth to the founder's brain.
But success breaks that tight loop. As the startup raises a Series A round, the headcount explodes. You hire a dedicated sales team, a dedicated customer success team, and multiple product managers. Suddenly, the organization fractures into departmental silos. The information stops flowing.
The sales team is hearing one set of complaints on their demo calls. The product managers are looking at completely different telemetry data on their dashboards. And the customer support team is drowning in live chat tickets about a bug that nobody else knows about. They lose the unified ground truth.
To prevent this fragmentation, Dr. Gupta outlines a strict executive checklist designed to force the feedback out of the silos and back into the open organizational culture. Number 1 on that list: weekly cross-functional voice of customer meetings. This isn't a casual catch-up. This is a mandatory structured hour where you put the head of product, the head of engineering, customer success, and sales in the same room. They are required to bring their siloed data, argue over the discrepancies, run the combined data through the RICE formula, and emerge with a single unified priority list for the week.
That structural alignment is vital. But number 2 on the checklist is my absolute favorite, and I think it would terrify a lot of people in Silicon Valley: mandatory support hours.
It is a brilliant mandate. The policy requires that every single engineer, every product manager, and even the executive suite must spend 2 to 4 hours every single month sitting on the front lines, handling live customer support tickets.
Think about the mechanical impact of that. Imagine a back-end developer who's been sheltered from the users for a year, writing code in a vacuum. Suddenly, on a random Tuesday afternoon, they are forced to jump into a live intercom chat and face the raw, unfiltered wrath of a user whose business is halted because of a bug in that developer's code. A Jira ticket with a priority label does not convey human pain, but a live chat with a panicked user forces raw, visceral empathy. I guarantee you the quality of that developer's code improves overnight because they felt the friction firsthand.
That visceral connection is exactly how you maintain customer obsession at scale. It prevents the engineers from treating users as abstract beta points. And the third habit on the executive checklist ensures this obsession reaches the highest levels of the company: board-level reporting.
Right. When a CEO walks into a quarterly board meeting, they always present the financial balance sheet, the burn rate, the revenue. But this framework dictates that you elevate the feedback metrics to the exact same level of importance. You don't just show the investors the money, you show them the Sean Ellis PMF score. You project the asymptotic cohort retention curve onto the screen to prove the bucket isn't leaking. You show them the net revenue retention. You prove that the foundational oxygen supply of the company is healthy.
It creates a relentless weekly sprint cycle across the entire organization. Instrumentation to capture the data, triage to organize it, execution to build the solution, and governance to ensure the system is working. That is the rhythmic heartbeat of a startup that survives the death zone.
We have covered an absolutely incredible amount of ground today. We started with broken spreadsheets and ended with board-level governance. Let's do a final rapid-fire review of the early feedback checklist for the founders listening out there.
If you are building something right now, ask yourself these hard questions. Are you conducting qualitative interviews using the rigorous rules of the mom test? Or are you just fishing for compliments? Do you have frictionless in-app microsurveys deployed? Or are you still relying on annoying email blasts? Are you cross-referencing everything your users say with objective behavioral telemetry? Are you protecting your engineering resources by routing every request through the RICE formula? And perhaps most importantly, are you aggressively closing the outbound loop, proving to your users that their voices actually matter?
Because feedback is oxygen. Cut it off, and you die. If you are an entrepreneur, whether you are deep in the tech stack or building a non-tech physical product and you want to permanently wire these systems into your company, or if you need access to incubator support and investor networks that understand these mechanics, you need to go check out StartupLanes.com. Their masterclass was the definitive blueprint for everything we unpacked today.
It has been a truly comprehensive journey through the precise mechanics of product survival and market alignment.
It really has. Thank you to everyone for spending this time with us and joining this deep dive. But before we sign off, I want to hand it over to you for one final, provocative thought. We've spent this entire time dissecting how to capture human frustration, the driver lost in a monsoon, the host taking a bad photo, the developer hitting a snag. But as we look at the trajectory of AI, where is all of this actually heading?
It is a compelling and somewhat daunting question. Throughout this entire masterclass, the fundamental unit of measurement has been human friction. A person tapping a screen, a person feeling confused. But if you look at the rapid evolution of the AI sentiment tagging and the algorithmic iteration we've discussed, it raises a fascinating question for the near future of product development. We are entering an era where AI agents will begin to use software on our behalf. They will execute workflows, book flights, and manage data without our manual input. So how will we build these continuous feedback loops when our primary user isn't a human being feeling emotional frustration, but a machine meticulously optimizing its own digital workflow? We've spent the last decade mastering human empathy in product design, but to survive the next decade, we might have to figure out the mechanics of machine-to-machine empathy.
Now, that is something to mull over, the leap from navigating muddy human emotions to optimizing for machine empathy. Keep listening to your users, keep iterating relentlessly, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.